Divine appointments. Have you ever heard that term used before? Well, it's real. And I want to share a couple examples of this with you because too often we get discouraged as people because we're praying and we're looking for a blessing. We're looking for a door to open. We're looking for God to work in our lives and we believe it's not happening. But in reality, we just might be missing out on how that blessing, how that answer to prayer is being sent to us from God. Because, see, in our mind, we're expecting it a certain way. But it could be that it's just wrapped in a different type of paper. It's wrapped in a different type of a box. It's wrapped in a different way than we're expecting it to be. Let me share with you a couple examples. A very good friend of mine, a pastor out in one of the western states, was invited to speak at a revival service out in the Philippines. It was a week-long revival service earlier this year. And he went out there and spoke, and afterwards he was talking to some of the people around, and he went out and talked to one individual that just looked like an ordinary person just standing there. The individual was asking my friend, the pastor, was he a full-time pastor? What did he do? And he said, no, he goes, the church isn't really big enough to be full-time. He goes, I'm a builder. I've been building homes for years and buildings and everything. And so the individual asked my friend, the pastor, for his business card, which he exchanged. He gave it to him, and that was the end of the conversation. About a week later, he gets a phone call, my friend does. And that phone call's from this individual that he met in the Philippines. As it turns out, that individual actually lives in the United States, and he was worth over $100 million. And he wanted to offer my friend an incredible opportunity. The man said that God put it on his heart to offer my friend, the pastor, millions of dollars to buy some land out where he was located at, which, again, was out towards the mountains and the western part of the United States, close to some of these big-name ski resorts, and said, I'd like you to buy some property, find the property, buy it, and start building homes. And these homes are going to be priced about $1 million and maybe up. Now, do you understand how much profit there is in $1 million home? It's pretty nice. So with this, they started that journey just earlier this year. My friend has already developed some of the land, built some of the homes, and has sold them. Now, the idea behind this is not just that, wow, he's building homes. The idea that I'm trying to get across to you is, while my friend, the pastor, has been praying for some kind of a breakthrough, he never, ever expected it to happen when he was in the Philippines. Because who would think that being thousands of miles away in the Philippines, speaking at a revival, he would ever meet somebody that was from the United States, that had the resources, the wisdom, the ideas, and the money to be able to open the door and bless him the way that he did. That, my friend, is divine appointment. That is God bringing somebody into your life that can open the doors and do something miraculous for you that will change the rest of your life. Unfortunately, most of us miss those opportunities because we don't go up and shake somebody's hand. We don't go up and say hello. We don't follow up or follow through on maybe a new relationship that's forming. And we don't have any idea of what we missed out on. That's one. I want to share with you another one. This one involves me many, many years ago. I was making a phone call to an airline, and I was trying to find an answer to something. And during that time, I was transferred about 15 times from one department to another, to another, to another. And finally I got transferred to a department, and the individual's name was Steve. And I told him what I was calling for, and he said, you're way off. We don't do anything like that. Like, I can't answer that question. And I said, what do you guys do? Out of frustration, I just wanted to know where I was transferred to. And he said, we're in charge of in-flight. We select all the pillowcases and the blankets and the magazines that go in flight all of our aircraft. And I almost kind of laughed quietly because it's like, you've got a separate department just to pick out pillowcases and blankets and magazines. It's like, wow, you guys must have a lot of extra money laying around. So at this point, we talked for a minute or two, and that was it. And before I got off the phone, I just said, Steve, listen, if I happen to be up in the area, is it okay if I stop by sometime just to say hello? And he goes, sure, absolutely. Now, I hung up the phone. Now, I'm in the very southwestern part of the Chicagoland area. The corporate office to this airline was on the northwest part of the Chicagoland area. But you understand, I just felt something special about this. I don't know what it was, but I felt I need to follow up on this. But I can't wait weeks or months because he'll forget who I am. So that next day, I drove up to the corporate headquarters of this airline. I walked inside. I went up to the receptionist and I said, I'm here to see, Mr. Steve such and such. And she goes, what's your name? I told him. She asked if I had an appointment. I said, no. And she calls, she dials something on the phone or presses some buttons on the phone. And she goes, all right, thank you. And she hangs up and she goes, I'm sorry, Mr. such and such doesn't know who you are, doesn't remember you. I said, all right, well, thank you. And I turned around to walk out and thought, well, that's that. Before I ever made it to the front door, the receptionist, the phone rings, the receptionist answers and says, Mr. DeJohn, wait. Mr. such and such is on his way up. So I turn around, headed back, and I'm sitting down. As I'm sitting down, a guy walks out, and he comes to me and he goes, are you Dave DeJohn? I said, yes. And he goes, well, I'm Steve such and such. I said, hi. He goes, you're the guy that I talked to yesterday. I said, yeah. He goes, come on back. So we went back. I was not in his office for more than 30 or 40 minutes. But what happened during those 30 or 40 minutes changed my life. And I want to explain to you what that was. As we're talking, I happened to bring something up to him. I said, you mentioned that you guys do the magazines. I said, how come you board the same golf magazines? Basically, you have, Golf Magazine and you have Golf Digest. And they're both basically the same magazine on the inside. I said, you open them up, they got all the instruction information in there, and they got, articles and everything. I said, don't you think that when people are flying, especially if they're nervous flying, they want to look at pictures? They want something more of like a lifestyle magazine? I mean, is that something you ever considered? With this, he lifts up his head, looks at me, and goes, wow. He goes, we just did a survey of the 250,000 members of our VIP club. They called it the Red Carpet Club, the VIP club. And he goes, the number one request they had was for a different golf magazine. He goes, Dave, the problem is they're all the same. I said, yeah, you're right, they are. Now, you have to understand something. I didn't really know what I was talking about because I'd only golfed like 4 times in my life. I've seen golf magazines in the doctor's office and the dentist office, and I flipped through and I felt these are all basically the same thing. They just changed the covers on them. But when he started talking about some of these other things, I had no idea what he was talking about. So at this point when he goes, Dave, he goes, they're all basically the same. I don't know where to go from here. He goes, Dave, what do you do? So I start telling him a little bit about what I've done in the past. And he goes, I have an idea. Why don't you start a golf magazine? Why don't you publish the golf magazine? You can own it. We will put it in flight and we'll replace Golf Magazine, which was the second largest golf magazine in the country. And I actually laughed. I said, Steve, I have no idea what I'm doing. I've never put a golf magazine together. I've never written an article. I said, I wouldn't know where to begin. He looks at me. Now, keep this in mind. I'm trying to almost talk him out of it, which is pretty stupid. I don't do that part. But I was almost trying to talk him out of it, saying, I'm not qualified to do this. But he was trying to convince me to try. He goes, Dave, there's something about you. I'd like you to consider this. He goes, you could find the resources you need and surround yourself with the right people, because you've said you've done that before. Find the right people that you need, put the magazine together, we'll get in our flights. You will be on 146,000 flights per issue, making my magazine the 3rd largest read magazine in the world with its very first issue. Very first issue. Unheard of. Unprecedented. So at this point, I said, you know what, I guess I have nothing to lose. I said, but Steve, before I go, if I call anybody up and talk to them about this, they're going to think I'm crazy. They're going to think I'm lying. Could you give me some kind of a letter or whatever showing that you, in fact, have offered me this and I do have the right to do this? Typed it up right then there, printed it up, signed it, and gave it to me. At that point, I'm off. On the way coming back, I took a different road because I knew it was going to go through one of the suburbs. And I know there was like 3 different bookstores on this road. I stopped at each one of the bookstores and I bought every single golf magazine that they had on their rack. I went back, came back to my office, and I just went through the magazines and I started calling every single writer in every single one of the magazines and just leaving messages. Within days, these people are calling back because I explained to them what this is about, what the journey was that I was on. It was amazing. I won't go into details on everything, but the writers we had put together was the most impressive group of writers in any golf magazine. One of the editors of one of the largest golf magazines in the country actually contacted me because he had heard the buzz going around the golf industry that a new magazine was starting. And he wanted to know if we already had an editor, if I'd be interested in bringing him on board. So do you understand? The doors were opening. This was God. You know, this was like a divine appointment, but it's because I took action. I made a phone call. I went out to meet with them individually. I had no idea what I was going to talk to Steve about. Nothing. But I just felt, I can't be blessed. God can't show me favor if I'm sitting at home in the recliner watching the Andy Griffith Show. I've got to do something. I didn't know what I was going to do, so I took the simplest of steps. I just drove up there and just introduced myself. That's all I did. God did the rest. That, my friend, is a divine appointment. So from this standpoint, I was interviewed just weeks later by the Wall Street Journal because, as they put it, this is the most unprecedented launch of any magazine in the entire publishing industry. Because, see, to get into this particular airline or any of the airlines, you have to go through a distributor. That distributor then takes all your magazines. They send it out to the airlines. They decide what magazines they pick and what magazines they don't pick. That's how this game works. They will not even consider talking to somebody that doesn't have X amount of readership. They want established publications. So when I contacted them and told them that, this is what's going on, I was told no, they're not going to work with me. So I ended up calling Steve back at the airline, and his comment was, I'll take care of this. He calls him up 3 or 4 days later. I get a call back from the distributor saying, all right, we need X amount of, copies of the magazine, and we need them sent up here, and then we'll go from here and send them out to all the hubs around the world, and then they'll be placed on the airlines. Guys, I was in awe. Again, I golfed maybe like 4 times in my life. I had no idea what was going on in the golf industry, but I realized with God as my partner, guiding me step by step on this journey, I didn't need to know everything. What I needed to do was surround myself with the people that did, and that gave me the credibility. And, being interviewed by the Wall Street Journal didn't hurt. So this is what took place during that thing. Folks, that is a divine appointment. Now, unfortunately, it didn't work out. The reason it didn't work out, in fact, let me share this with you. At the time, Golf Digest, which was the largest magazine of its kind in the country, was charging about $100,000 for a full-page ad for a month. That's 1 month, $100,000 for a full-page ad. Golf Magazine, which was the second, was charging, I think, around $60,000 or $70,000 for a full-page 4-color ad in their magazine. Number 3 was around $35,000. So I priced ours at $28,000 for a full-page ad. We had room for about 40 pages of ads. Do you realize that's over $1,200,000 in advertising possibilities per month? We're looking at about $14 million in revenue per year from this publication. And what shocked people was my total cost to do this was only about $40,000 per issue, because I didn't have to produce millions of copies of the magazine. I only had to produce a certain amount of tens of thousands of the magazine, because the pass-along rate inside the aircraft is what was accepted and counted by the companies that want to advertise in magazines. What they were concerned about is how many people are actually reading this, and they accepted those stats from the airline. So I was looking at potentially, $12, $13 million a year net profits and income. Well, this is supposed to be launched January of 2002. If you remember, that's all the notices were sent out. We were set to do that. If you remember what happened September 11, 2001 with the terrorist attack, the airline industry dropped. I mean, it went into the toilet. People were afraid to fly. They had no idea what was going to happen next. There was concern. Conventions were being canceled. People weren't traveling like they were. So all of a sudden I got scared here, because I just went from potentially making $12 million a year to thinking I got to come up with $40,000 to $50,000 a month every month to pay for this magazine that I now have a written signed contract with for the next year, and maybe with no advertisers. So I had to call up Steve back at the airline and asked if I can come see him. He said, yes. I went up there, and he goes, you want out of the contract? I said, yeah. I said, I do. I said, our potential advertisers, we had lined up. We had like 4 or 5 advertisers lined up already, which would have covered the entire cost that I needed. He goes, David goes, I understand. No problem. And they released me from the contract right then and there. Now, the reason I'm sharing this with you is for 2 reasons. One, Not everything's going to work out, but the lessons I learned from that were life-changing about divine appointments. Because you see, actually, it happened twice during that. Once with them signing the contract with me, and twice to release me from the contract. So, divine appointments can be there to help you succeed at something as you're taking that journey. But the divine appointment could also be there to help you or rescue you from something that could be disastrous for you. Folks, please understand this. Your divine appointment might be out there. The answer to your prayers might be out there. The blessings that you've been waiting for might be out there. They're just not wrapped and packaged the way that you expect them to be. And you could be missing them. Have a blessed day.